If I say to you white privilege, I guarantee there'll be some kind of reaction. There usually is, which is why I suspect it was used in the following context. The use of the terms including white privilege may have contributed to the neglect of white working class pupils in the education system, according to a Conservative-led Commons committee. That brings up all sorts of feelings, and I wanted to have a look into this. So the question I'm asking are white working class children suffering because they are white? Or are poor white children deprived more than richer white children? I mean, to me, it sounds like a bit of a red herring because, as Charles Dickens showed in Oliver Twist, there was an underclass, if you like, of white children suffering when there was nothing else but white children. Anyway, I wanted to look into this more. Maurice Mcleod joins us. He's the chief executive of Race on the Agenda. Maurice, what do you think about this? When we say white privilege, is that something that is hindering white working class children when it comes to schooling?
Hello, Trisha. It's you summed it up, to be honest, in your introduction. It's a total red herring. It's really, you can look at why kids in the north, in particular, have been doing really badly and have been left behind.
Mm-hmm.
It's got absolutely nothing to do with the fact that they're white. It's because they're in an area that's had all the economy sucked out of it by London and the southeast. That's not about race, and to make it about race is just deliberately divisive. It's so that they can go, oh, it's because you guys are talking about white privilege. And look, these kids are poor. If they cared about these working class white kids, it wouldn't have taken a black footballer to feed them.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's start at the very beginning. White privilege is when a lot of people hear the term white privilege, they think of KKK, Ku Klux Klan, white hoods, far-right groups marching in the streets and that sort of thing. What is meant by white privilege?
Yes, so I mean, I think that it's good that we start here because I think a lot of people completely misunderstand what the term is. It certainly doesn't mean everybody who's white is wealthy and has got sort of riches beyond their beliefs and has no problems in the world. All it means is in the journey of life that we all have, having white skin is an advantage to not having white skin. And so, if you looked at the very kids we were just talking about, what they've compared is kids on free school meals up in the north and kids on free school meals in London. If they compared kids in free school meals in the north with the black kids in their class, they'd still see that there'd be an additional gap there. So that's what white privilege is. It doesn't.
But some of the figures that came through in that study were showing the number of high achieving or the number of Asian children, the number of black children who had gone on to succeed and gone on to university. And the picture that has been painted is that these white working class children have been left behind because they are white. Now, it's interesting, when I put something out on social media, somebody made the comment that immigrant families are so appreciative of the education system. They push their kids a lot harder and a lot tougher, which is a bit of a stereotype as well, isn't it?
I think that's a total stereotype, and it might be true. I'm sure there are white working class families who push their kids really hard as well, and there are families of all different types who aren't interested in education. So I think that's a bit of a bit of a myth. I mean, it's really evident the fact that all the children from an area that's been economically starved end up struggling. That's obvious. Then you don't need to. I don't think you need to analyze that and to just, as I say, linking that with the race argument is just a complete red herring, and it's to take our eye off. It's because of underfunding. That's what's happened.
Do you think there's going to be a repercussion because that race was brought into it? Do you think that it's going to, well, you talked about widening divisions.
Yeah, sadly, I think that is what it does. It says to those kids who feel left behind. I'm talking about the white kids in the north, for instance, who feel left behind and feel excluded. And there's now a government report saying, yeah, it's because all the money's going to black kids. That's why you're so of course that spreads division. Of course that makes, the fact that we're even having this conversation about black or white working class kids on free school meals, that they all need support. All children need a decent education. So racializing it is it's deliberate, and it's part of this culture war. I'm afraid it's part of this sort of phony culture war that the government wants to play, which is sort of it's saying all these lot are others, and they're taking away something from you. They want the country to be different. It's trying to scare people into voting Tory, I think.
Well, and it's interesting to see historically, as I mentioned in the introduction, with Oliver Twist back in, Dickens' time, for instance, other reasons were given. It seems to be whatever the hot topic is. If you want publicity, you link struggling and poverty of white children to that. And this just feels like it's the latest thing that comes along. What do you say to people who would say, though, that it's certain areas, inner city areas and what have you, that white working class children have gone to the bottom of the pile because black children have so many extra things, extra money, extra housing? Because there is that view, isn't it, that refugees, for instance, and immigrants are given a leg up, whereas these white working class children aren't.
Yeah, and I've heard that a lot. I mean, if you actually look into it, it's often not the case. It's often not the case that there are all these riches for I'm a local councillor. I represent a part of South London that has a lot of poor black kids, and they're not being showered with these riches. As I was saying before, the issue is, let's invest in all of the children. Let's make sure that the white kids, both in London and up north, who feel like they're being left out, that there are things for them. But all this is focused on the kids that do well. What about the kids that don't do well? Why is this report talking about black kids being so much more likely to be excluded from school or to leave school with nothing? It's all very well focusing on the kids that you're able to get into higher education and can say well done to those kids. Great, but if you look at the whole, the whole group, including the kids that do badly, I think you get a very different picture.
Yeah, and it is really sad when you look at, as you mentioned right in the beginning, Marcus Rashford and the amazing work that he's done. And people, I posted something that somebody had actually said very wisely, that it took a young black footballer who came from a tough beginning to actually get the government to step up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's what's funny is we've got a government that has a really strong majority, and you think can do whatever it wants. But I think it's shown it's really susceptible. This is a government based on PR, and it's really susceptible to bad PR and so that's why instead of making policies, it makes PR statements. Eat out to help out or whatever, instead of actually having policies. And this is the same sort of thing. Instead of dealing with these kids, They do a slogan, they're not stupid. They do a headline slogan that's got all of us. We're doing it now. We're talking about
it. Exactly. It's worked.
It works, doesn't it? Yeah. And so they do all of that instead of actually tackling, I would say, any of the actual problems. So yeah, it's a government led by PR.
So what is the answer then to working class kids, that level that there always has been, hasn't there? This is a discussion that's been had over the years, time and time again. As you said, you're a counsellor. What can we do? I mean, the fact that Sure Start's been taken away and things like that, I won't get into that. But what can be done rather than stoking divisions?
Yeah, you kind of brushed on it just there. We need to reinvest in our young people. I mean,
as indeed the Duchess of Cambridge is talking about.
Absolutely. If we're going to invest in anything, let's invest in our young. It sounds corny, but they are the future, aren't they? So let's put money into Sure Start. Let's have community resources. When I was a kid, there was stuff for me to do around the accounts estate I grew up on. There was things I could do. I could broaden my mind. There were other opportunities. All of that, bit by bit, has been taken away by austerity and cuts. We need to reverse that, because we end up we end up just dealing with the problem. Then we end up going, okay, there's loads of problems. Let's just put more police on the streets.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless you start at the beginning. Yeah.
Well, I totally agree with you, because when I grew up, same with you, there were youth clubs, all sorts of things going on. And I mean, my parents couldn't afford childcare, but we had things that we could go along to, rather than being, I hate that term, latchkey kids and what have you, or kids roaming the streets. So yeah, I have to say I thoroughly agree with you. Thank you so much for shedding light on that. And just please remember that definition of white privilege. It doesn't mean that you're full of riches and wealth and what have you. It means that you're suffering not because of your skin colour. And it's don't rise to the bait, I'd say. Thank you so much, Maurice, for joining us.